सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् सदात्मध्याननिरतं विषयेभ्यः पराङ्मुखं नौमि शास्त्रेषु निष्णातं चन्द्रशेखर भारतीम्. Page 3, 10th line from the bottom. Nahi vedam vina pramanantaram dharma vishaye padamaadhatumishte tasya atindriyatvena pratyakshasya tatra aprasarat. Ata eva nanumanam tatra prasarati pratyakshamulakatvad anumana pravrittehe. In the last session, we had taken a look at why Adi Shankara BhagavatpAda in the second verse to the Vivekachudamani, starting with Jantunam Narajanma Durlabham, had used the word Tasmat Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata. We had looked at why he had used the word dharma as opposed to karma, and why he had used Vaidika Dharma and with an emphasis on it being something that is revealed in the Vedas. And the reason why we had said that dharma is something which is revealed only in the Vedas is because dharma is something which is beyond the reach of senses, and therefore perception, which relies on the senses to reveal its object, is unable to reveal dharma, because dharma is something which is beyond the grasp of the instruments of perception. We had also looked at Anumana Pramanam, or inferential reasoning, and we had seen that Anumana Pramanam is not able to access dharma as well, and the reason for that is because any inferential reasoning, not just about dharma in particular, any inferential reasoning requires the backup of perception to provide the perceptual data which is necessary with which to come to a logical conclusion or logical analysis. This is the general rule in relation to inferential reasoning depending on perception. Now, coming to the specific case of whether inference or logical reasoning can reveal dharma. Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal says that inference of dharma is not possible because dharma itself is not the object of perception, and because inferential reasoning requires to have a perceptual data point as its basis, it is not possible for inference to reveal dharma as well, and therefore it is Veda and Veda alone that is capable of revealing what is dharma and what is adharma. Moving on, अतएव वेदव्यतिरिक्तशब्दोऽपि न तं बोधयितुं पारयति प्रत्यक्षादिना अवधारितस्यैव अर्थस्य लौकिकशब्देन बोधयितुं शक्यत्वात्. Here he is saying, therefore, apart from Veda, you have everyone else who speaks outside the scope of Vedic Shabda Pramana. There is a Laukika Shabda Pramana also, there are Laukika Shabdas also, meaning when we converse with each other in daily lives, we rely on each other's statements as well. Sometimes our teacher will teach us something and we'll rely on that statement. If our friend will tell us that something is the case, we will rely on it. If the newspapers say that something has happened, we'll rely on it. All of these are examples of Laukika Shabda, wherein we are looking at verbal testimony which is outside the scope of the Vedas. And what AchArya is saying, just like inference has as its basis pratyaksha, worldly shabda or worldly statements made also have pratyaksha or perception as its basis. It's only that which is known by perception, by direct cognition, that is then verbalized and spoken as words. So, for example, we see an event happening and we then report that event to someone else. So, pratyakshadina avadharitasya arthasya laukika shabdena bodhayatum shakyatvat. So, therefore, if someone is writing or speaking a sentence, it has as its basis someone having perceived the object of the sentence. So if I'm talking about a particular activity or a particular topic, either me or someone else would have to have seen it first. Now, therefore, dharma, which is beyond the scope of perception, is not able to be revealed by Laukika Shabda as well. What about Smritis? That is taken up next. Smritinam api paurusheyatvena purushanam brahma pramadadi sambhavena kartri dosha nibandhana apramanya shankayam doshagandhanagandhita श्रुतिमूलकतया प्रामाण्यस्य वक्तव्यतया वेद व्यतिरिक्तस्य शब्दस्य धर्मे स्वतः अप्रमाणत्वात्. What the Acharya here is saying is that what is said in the Smritis is Paurusheya, it has a human source. So the Vedas are Apaurusheya. There is no human who is said to have created the Vedas, but the Smritis are not that. Smritis have a human origin, they have been authored by a particular Rishi. And even though the Rishi may be extraordinarily great, because they have a human agency and they are created by a human being, they suffer from a suspicion on their validity because human beings are susceptible to carelessness, pramada, or misunderstanding, brahma. And therefore, any work that has been authored by a human being is potentially subject to a suspicion about its validity. Whereas the Vedas are completely untainted by any human origin, and therefore the defects of a human speaker or a human creator do not attach to the Vedas themselves. And therefore, it is only such a Veda which is untainted by such a defect which can determine what is dharma and adharma. Therefore, any Shabda or any utterance by a human being which is other than the Veda cannot intrinsically by itself be the arbiter or the authority of what dharma is. It does not have swatav pramanyam. It is not self valid. It requires support or validation by an external source. Continuing, Kincha smritikartaro va atindriyam dharma katham gajanan योग सामर्थ्येन इति चेत् तत् सामर्थ्यं कथं तैः सम्पादितं धर्मानुष्ठानेन इति चेत् स धर्मः कथं ज्ञातः. Acharya is asking, how did those who wrote the Smritis, how did they know about dharma which is beyond sensory perception? If it's on the basis of yoga practices, i.e., their practices with yoga gave them the capability to perceive things which were beyond normal sensory perception, how did they achieve that capability? How did they know what sort of yogic practices to do which would allow them to see things which are beyond normal sensory perception? If it is said, well, it is based on those practices that are conducive with dharma or by following dharma, how did they know the dharma itself? So this leads to a circular argument. If you are saying that in order to know dharma, you have to indulge in yogic practices, and to know what yogic practices you have to know the Veda, then you're ultimately depending on the Veda. It is the Veda which reveals what practices one must follow, which will lead you to perceive things which are beyond normal sensory perception. If you say that is not the Veda, then what is the other source? If you say the source of which practices to follow, etc., was on the basis of some other person's yogic practices, it leads to infinite regress. How do you know what was the basis for that yogic practice? How do you know which practice to do? So the thing is, either you have to admit that it is the Veda that revealed the practices which gave the Smriti Kartaras or the creators of the Smriti the means with which to see Dharma, or simply you can say the Veda itself reveals the Dharma. You don't have to come up with this circuitous route to prove that the knowledge of Dharma is possible even from a non-Vedic source. Continuing, अतएव यो ब्रह्माणं विदधाति पूर्वं यो वै वेदांश्च प्रहिणोति तस्मै इति प्रथमं सृज्यमानस्य हिरण्यगर्भस्यापि ईश्वर अनुग्रहीत वेदमूलकमेव धर्मज्ञानमिति बोधयति श्रुतिः. किं वक्तव्यम् इतरेषाम्? अतः सुष्ठूक्तं वैदिकेति. Acharya is saying that is why the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, which says, he who first distributed the Veda at the beginning of creation to Brahma, that is Hiranyagarbha, and through Hiranyagarbha propagated the Vedas to the rest of humanity. Now, if the very first Jiva, the greatest Jiva of them all, Hiranyagarbha or Lord Brahma, if he himself has received his knowledge not from his own intellect but from the Veda which has been given to him by Ishvara, what can it be said about everybody else? Even if they are the greatest of all rishis, they will still, in creation, be one step below Brahma only. So, if Brahma himself, his knowledge is based on the Vedas, everybody else, naturally, their knowledge too will be based on Vedas also. So, their knowledge of dharma will be based on Vedas. He is using the Kaimutika Nyaya, what can be said for everybody else? If Brahma himself, his knowledge of dharma is based from the Veda, everybody else, their knowledge of dharma also will be based from the Veda only. Therefore, Adi Shankaracharya quite appropriately used the word Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata. It is appropriate to say Vaidika. Abhaksha Vayubhaksha itivat Vaidikameyattvam dharmasya bodhayati. Now here the question could be, okay, Vedas are the source of dharma, but are they the only source of dharma? To which Acharya is quoting another statement from the Shastra, which says that great rishis and people who do penances, tapasvis, survive on air, vayubhakshaha, and abhakshaha on water. Such a statement occurs. So the question becomes is, does this statement mean that they survive on air and water in addition to normal food? Clearly not, because the import of the statement is in saying how great their penance is and that they can do that even without consuming food. That merely by water and air, they're able to survive for a long time purely on the strength of their penance. So, therefore, the import is in saying that they consume only air and only water. Similarly, the statement here, which says that it is Vedas are the source of dharma, means Vedas are the only source of dharma. So Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata means Vedas are the only source, not that Vedas are the source, something else is also the source. Continuing, Atra Dharma Shabdena Pravritti Dharma Nivritti Dharmashta Kathyete Uktam hi Gita Bhashye Vivido hi Vedokto Dharma Pravritti Lakshano Nivritti Lakshanascha. The word dharma in this context refers to dharma in its dual aspects. One which is focused towards activity and performance of rituals, which is the pravritti dharma, and one which is focused on renunciation and withdrawal from actions and worldly activities, the nivritti dharma. As Sri Adi Shankara BhagavatpAda says in the Gita Bhashya, dharma that is spoken of in the Vedas consists of two kinds of dharma, that which is geared towards action, the pravritti dharma, and that which is geared towards renunciation, which is nivritti dharma. Continuing, dharma eva paramam sadhanam nitya sukha avaptau nanyadapeksham astiti karma mimamsakaha tan katakshayati margeti. The Purva Mimamsakas hold that dharma is the final and the ultimate means for the attainment of eternal bliss, and that apart from dharma there is no other purushartha that is required. Now Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada indicates that that is not the case by the use of the word marga in the expression Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata. How is that the case? If you look at the means to Brahman, it is through the Shravana Manana Nididhyasanam of the Shruti, Upanishads specifically, and specifically within the Upanishads of Mahavakya. To qualify to do that, one should have taken up sannyasa ashrama or the fourth ashrama to even enter the study of Vedanta. That sannyasa ashrama includes within it the aspect of nivritti or renunciation or withdrawal from worldly activities. Now, to qualify for sannyasa, one should have had the sadhana chatushtayam, which is viveka, vairagya, mumukshutvam, shamadhi shatkam, etc. Now, to get that shamadhi shatkam, one should have had chitta shuddhi, which is the purity of the mind. the purity of the mind is only possible because of the performance of karma in a fashion wherein the results of the karma are dedicated to Ishvara, thus making it karma yoga as opposed to kamya karma. So, thus we can see that karma is not the direct means, or dharma is not the direct means to moksha, rather, that it is the first in a long sequence of steps to be followed before one attains the qualifications necessary for Brahman and one attains Brahman. So, thus, dharma cannot be the means to ultimate bliss, as the Purva Mimamsakas say. It is only an initial step in the process. This is revealed in the next sentence by Acharya. Tena parama purushartha sadhanibhuta ब्रह्म साक्षात्कार साधन वेदांत विचार हेतुत्वेन संन्यास रूप निवृत्ति धर्मस्य तत्साधन वैराग्य हेतुभूत चित्तशुद्धि हेतुत्वेन निष्काम कर्मानुष्ठान रूप प्रवृत्ति धर्मस्य च अपेक्षितत्वं न तु साक्षात् निरतिशय सुख साधनत्वं तद् उभयस्येति सूचितम्. Acharya is saying tena सूचितम्, by the use of that is the use of the word marga in Vaidika dharma marga parata. It is suchitam, it is indicated. What is indicated? That parama purushartha sadhani bhuta brahma sakshatkara, the ultimate purushartha is moksha. For that moksha purushartha, the sadhana is brahma sakshatkara. Sadhana means the means. The means to attain moksha is the direct cognition or direct perception, direct experience of Brahma. The aparoksha anubhava that I am Brahman. That cognition, also known as the akhandakara vritti, is the direct means for moksha. Now, how to attain that Brahma Sakshatkara? He says, Tat sadhana vedanta vichara hetutvena. To attain that Brahma Sakshatkara, you need to have another means. The means to that is the analysis and contemplation of the statements of the Upanishads, the Vedanta. So, by contemplating along the lines of what has been taught in the Upanishads by the Guru, one attains Brahma Sakshatkara. Okay, so how does one qualify? How can one do the Vedanta Vichara? The means for that is Sannyasa Rupa Nivritti Dharma. One has to take up sannyasashrama and follow all the nivritti dharma that belong to sannyasashrama, so that as part of that sannyasashrama, one has the time, the mental faculty, and access to the guru that is required for Vedanta Vichara. Now, how to enter sannyasashrama? Tat sadhana vairagya. Okay. Now one needs to attain Viveka, Vairagya, Mumukshutvam, Samadhi Shatkam. That is the what is known as the Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. One needs to have these four factors in order to take up Sannyasa Ashrama. Viveka, discrimination; Vairagya, dispassion towards worldly objects; Mumukshutvam, intense desire for moksha; Samadhi Shatkam, the sixfold characteristics of the mind comprising Shama, control of the mind; Dama, control of the senses, control of the body; Uparama, which is sannyasa or renunciation; Titiksha, forbearance; Samadhanam, mental equanimity; Shraddha, faith in the words of the Guru and the scriptures. So, if we have these 9 qualities, one can qualify for Vedanta Vichara through the means of sannyasa ashrama. Okay. Now, how to attain this sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, these fourfold factors? The means to that is nishkama karmanusthana rupa pravritti dharma. One needs to follow all the pravritti dharma in the karma kanda, but need to do that with an ishwararpana buddhi, with a nishkama buddhi. One needs to do it without desiring for the material results. Now, karma kanda consists of various rituals that have been prescribed by the Veda for certain material results. But the Veda itself says, if you perform the very same rituals without any desire for the material results, the same karma will lead to chitta shuddhi. And the chitta shuddhi is what manifests itself in the form of the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti. So therefore, the means for vairagya, etc., which is required for sannyasa, the chitta shuddhi, which is required for sannyasa, is the nishkama karma. And the nishkama karma, one needs to follow the pravritti dharma. So therefore, the pravritti dharma that the Mimamsakas refer to as the means to the moksha or the Parama Purushartha, in Vedanta, in Uttara Mimamsa, we say it is not the direct means, which is why Acharya says, Natu Sakshan Niratishaya Sukha Sadhanatvam Tat Ubhayasya Suchitam. Therefore, neither the Ubhaya means both the Nivritti Dharma, which is essentially Sannyasa Ashrama, or the Pravritti Dharma, which is undertaken in the Grihastha, Brahmacharya, Vanaprastha. Neither the Pravritti Dharma nor the Nivritti Dharma are direct means for moksha, and therefore, to indicate that that is the case, Acharya is Shankaracharya is using the word marga in Vaidika Dharma Marga Parata. So, to summarize, in this one line, Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal has outlined the entire process of Sanatana Dharma. That is, one starts with Kamya Karma and attains material results. After performance of Nitya Naimittika Karma in a Nishkama manner, in a desireless manner, one converts the very same karma into Karma Yoga. And by the performance of Karma Yoga for a sustained period of time, one attains the Chitta Shuddhi, the purity of the mind, which manifests itself in the Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti, the Vivekadi Sampatti that we have referred to. After one has attained a significant amount of Chitta Shuddhi, one then graduates naturally into the Sannyasa Ashrama mode or a renunciation mode, where then one performs the Nivritti Dharma, where one withdraws oneself from worldly endeavors and engages in Vedanta Vichara after having heard the words of the Guru and the Upanishad in the Sannyasa Ashrama. And then, having performed the Vedanta Vichara for a period of time, one attains Brahma Sakshatkara or the direct cognition of Brahman. And the moment one attains Brahma Sakshatkara, one has attained the Parama Purushartha or Moksha. And through this sequence of steps, one attains the highest means in Advaita Vedanta, in Sanatana Dharma, in fact, in all human endeavor. So, with this, we will conclude this talk and we will take up the rest of the Vyakhya in the next talk. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.